At this point, we'll turn our attention to an issue that strikes at the very heart of our nation's future, which is education. Now, insecurity has continued to take a heavy toll, with more than 180 schools shut down in parts of northern Nigeria. That sobering reality captures the growing crisis facing basic education, especially in communities repeatedly targeted by banditry, insurgency, and abductions. For many families, schools that should be safe havens of learning have become vulnerable spaces, forcing children out of classrooms and leaving teachers in fear. Now, the implications are deep, ranging from rising illiteracy levels to widening inequality and a generation of children left behind. So this morning, we'll be asking, what does this mean for the state of education in northern Nigeria, and how can stakeholders respond to this urgent challenge? To help us unpack these issues, we are joined via Zoom from Sokoto State by Professor Tukur Mohammed Baba, the National Publicity Secretary of the Arewa Consultative Forum. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right. With this statistic report by the Daily Trust in an investigation, about 180 schools have been shut in the north due to insecurity. So can you help us understand the severity of this case and the current security situation in the northern region and how it specifically affects schools?
Thank you. First of all, we have to put the discussion in context, and that is access to education or the availability of educational facilities for our teeming population, especially the youth. As is well known, and as you have indicated, the northern part of the country has been lagging behind, so to speak, in providing access to education for the population. Now, this has been due to a number of reasons: historical, socio-economic, and political. Historically, the North has lagged behind in access to modern Western education, which is basically the major factor determining so many things affecting life outcomes and so on in the country. As you know, the South has, since the introduction of education, the southern part of the country embarrassed it, but it's been very slow in the North due to a number of cultural reasons, one of which is suspicion that Western education will debase culture, the Islamic culture in the main, but also the idea that the fact has also remained that the provision of these facilities had been slow. Funny enough, the campaign to promote Western education was more intense during the First Republic. For one reason or another, the campaign to convince people to go to school slowed down after the collapse of the First Republic. Not just slowing up, but the population has been growing tremendously. Independent.
Would be what?
The total population of the country was about 45 million. Now we have grown to about 200 million, over close to 70% of which are located in the north. We have had that the north has close to 80% of the out-of-school children. That's why investment in education has lagged behind. And of course, the publicity corruption has also had an effect on that. Doubts have remained about the utility of education, and now comes into the fray insecurity. And as the NCS said about a year and a half ago, the effect of insecurity on access to be convincing parents and their students that accessing education is worth their while. These doubts have lingered. Now comes insecurity. You know, whatever we do, the educational facilities have to be secure for students and teachers and all supporting staff alike. Without security, any effort done will come short. The security of life and property is one of those factors that will inspire confidence in parents and students that it worth their while to go to school. The abduction of school children, students, and so on has had devastating effect on this confidence because people begin to doubt. You don't go to school to die, you go to learn. When the environment is not conducive for that, it inflicts a devastating blow. Nobody, even our love for children, our love for each other, nobody will send their child or their unsafe environment. It's not just unsafe, it's like a threat to life and limbs. So I will say that the insecurity, especially where it is intensified in places like Zamfara, Katsina, Sokoto, Borno, and many other places in the northeast and northwest, and of course now in north central. If you see the effect in, the spread of banditry to Niger State and even in Kwara State that has been educationally advanced relatively. Right. So it's a devastating development and a very sad one at that. And of course, efforts must be made to make sure, first and foremost, that the facilities are secure. And those individuals or our students who want to access education must feel safe. There must not be apprehension that you are not saying goodbye to parents and parents are not saying goodbye to children only to have news. It was very devastating at that.
Professor,
that they've
we'll
been
have
abducted.
to go on a quick break. We'll be going on a quick break. When we come back, we'll be continuing this discussion on the impact of insecurity on education in northern Nigeria. So we'll be right back.
What if the truth had a frequency? A signal powered by real stories and trusted voices. Because the stories that shape us deserve to reach all of us.
That are meant to happen.
We examine the evolving political landscape in the country.
What has destroyed our democracy?
So their fiscal characteristics set them apart.
The program, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV.
There are men and women in the police who have worked for 35 years. I'm 37.
Trust TV tells the Nigerian story. Truthfully, fearlessly, and beautifully. Culture, reality, connection. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back. Our guest is still with us, Professor Tukur Mohammed Baba, a National Publicity Secretary of the Arewa Consultative Forum. And then we're diving straight to it. Professor, when we talk about insecurity, oftentimes, we talk about, loss of life, properties, and what have you. What is the deep impact on the future of children's learning and development?
It destroys confidence. That is number one. It feels that the child is going into an unsafe environment. And it's not just for the child. For parents, going into an unsafe environment or sending children to an unsafe environment is just out of the question. Because lives and limbs are threatened. The learning environment, the learning process will not take place because then the attention will be on whether the person is safe or not. And it's just devastating, whether you are attending as a day student on your way to the school and on the way back from the school, within the school. It's really devastating. It cannot be overstated.
All right, Professor, understanding the great and long-term impact of, the impact of insecurity on education, how do you think that these closure of schools would affect future workforce and economic potential of the region, especially understanding that the North has been lagging behind in education as well? And with insecurity on top of that, how would that impact its future?
Well, the most immediate impact is that it destroys the confidence of all people involved in the process: parents, students, the teaching staff, supporting staff, and everybody. Nobody goes with their sense into an insecure environment. And of course, for education to take place effectively, people have to be confident. Everyone involved have to be confident. Now, insecurity destroys that confidence. The mere thought, the mere contemplation of going into an insecure environment is enough to scare any rational human being. And of course, we are dealing with an environment, or we are dealing with a context where there is already skepticism about the value of education. One, there is inadequacy of facilities. Two, there is also doubt about whether or not the Western modern education is useful. And of course, the whole concept, for example, of Boko Haram is telling you that it's so worth it. And so when we are dealing with these problems, inadequacy, low quality, and then insecurity. Insecurity, I think, is one of the most devastating above everything else, because then, nobody contemplates going to school.
So, Professor, in states where, schools are constantly shut down, do you think that the government have been able to realize the link between insecurity and poor educational outcomes in the states?
Oh, yeah, there is no doubt government is concerned. I mean, the impact is direct, is visible. It's when you abduct children, small children, or, vulnerable populations, whether they are in basic education, primary and secondary, or even in the tertiary institutions, as we have seen. If I remind you, for example, the abduction of school children in Kankara, they were just picked. Or when bandits attacked a student hostel, you remember one of the ladies in the school telling the news that her father had told her to go back immediately, that if the school is not safe, then there is no point going to school. That single example will tell you the impact of it. No parent will send their children on any errand, let alone going to school for a prolonged number of hours, when it is known that the environment is not safe. So it impacts on the psychology, it impacts on confidence, and it compels people to think, is going to school worth the life of a child? That's a very, very devastating thought, that you can send a child to a situation where their life is threatened. And of course, it's not just threatening life, even abduction, taking children into custody. And then, parents are not sure what is happening, their welfare, their life, and so on. There is no doubt about it. Government is aware. And of course, government is helpless unless we can guarantee the security situation, unless we can have the facilities where they can be secured. And, you know, this banditry has been unforeseen. And schools, the physical environment had been designed until this day to be free. A light security here, you can fence a school, but a lot of the schools had no fencing because the assumption was schools are part of the community. And of course, there is a limit to how much walls you can build around facilities and communities. So when they are breached, then of course, nobody in their right senses will try to access education. So there is no doubt government is aware. But of course, the nature of the banditry, the fact that it's like a guerrilla warfare, the randomness of it all, you just don't know when it will occur, where it will occur, how it will occur. These things are enough to discourage the bravest of parents or the bravest of students. And then, of course, government has been trying. It's only in recent times that we began to pay attention to physical security. But of course, psychological security will also drive from physical security. If the environment is safe, is considered safe, relatively safe, then people will go. But when the environment is open, and then of course there is inadequacy, you cannot provide an army for every school. Because then it will be the largest army in the world, probably 3-4 times the size of the Chinese army. It's impractical. So the ideal thing would have been to have the schools where there would be early warning, early response, and of course, that will inspire confidence in all the stakeholders, parents, teachers, the children themselves, and so on. So, but of course, like we said, it's not just schools, health facilities and everything, the road and so on. So there is no doubt that it is a devastating development. And the more insecure the environment is, the less that school becomes attractive to anyone.
All right, Professor, you just made mention that there is no doubt the government knows what is going on. They're aware of it. But do you think that they are doing enough when it comes to addressing the insecurity around school? And if it is not enough, what do you think should be done at a national and a state level when it comes to policy making in prioritizing and safeguarding, the future of basic education in conflict zones?
It's a tough question. Obviously, one cannot say the government is not doing anything. The government is doing something. But we have to look at it from the scale of the problem. You see, urban areas are most conducive for this kind of endeavors because you can secure the urban location very easily. You can make physical changes. But then when schools are scattered, where the population is, and population, especially in the rural areas, is most vulnerable and being exposed. And then, of course, the cost of providing physical security in this location will be horrendous. Like I said, the ideal thing will be the school environment should be relatively free. But where the population is scattered, where the population is not concentrated, of course, it becomes very challenging. The insecurity itself is something that is new in the sense that it's a modern development that we did not contemplate would happen or will get worse or will spread or will become pervasive. Where it becomes pervasive, as we are seeing now on places where it is taking place, everything comes to a standstill. And then, of course, the future of these children, the contemplation that they will get educated, be trained, and be deployed to all sectors of the economy is jeopardized. Government is doing a lot, but we must be quick to admit that the problem is new, is unprecedented, and every one of us has been caught unawares. If we had known, then of course we would have taken measures. If you ask me what will government do, The most reasonable thing is to try to deal with the whole concept of insecurity. The bandits, the terrorists, and others need to be tackled. And once we can take the primary source of the insecurity, then, of course, more than half of the problem is solved. And we have to also pay attention to the message that parents should do as much as they can, and people and everyone should do as much as they can, not to be discouraged, because that will be given victory to the terrorists. That will be given victory to the bandits, whose major aim is to disrupt our life, disrupt normality. Then, of course, like I hinted earlier, we have to have the facilities that will incorporate early warning, early response, which makes intelligence gathering, processing, and storage very, very critical. And of course, a thought should be given to how children can safely access those schools. Maybe we should have a situation where schools are concentrated so that security forces would themselves be concentrating in a specific area. But of course, where the population is scattered, you have to think of transportation. There has to be secure transportation to the schools and from the schools. And of course, also the security of the home environment. It's a whole cocktail of problems that are devastating. And of course, we know the effect of conflict zones on education as it is on all aspects of life. Societies that have had conflict have had children disrupted. In fact, in many places, you see the same children who should be in school. If they are not on the streets, they are abducted and inducted into these, so to speak, they provide a reserve army of recruits for the children who should be in school. And of course, children are a very impressionable stage in their lives, and they are easily led away by sentiment. When you should be molding them towards occupations and professions, you are molding them towards violence. Then in their life, violence becomes normal. Violence becomes a means to an end. It is without doubt a terrible situation.
All right, in your response to my colleague's question, you also gave a word of light to Nigerians not to give hope when it comes to, the insecurity in the country and also education. But then I would love to ask you, beyond, government intervention, because each time we talk about, the insecurity challenges we're facing, we always call on the government. Now, beyond the government, how can communities, religious leaders, traditional rulers as well, institutions, how can we all come together in, keeping education alive in secure areas?
This is a very good question. And of course, the idea is to take the whole community into consideration in planning, in implementation, and in operation. There is no doubt. Government cannot do everything. Much as we blame government, especially federal government, the problems are local problems. So the solutions have to begin from the local level. One is enlightenment, two is planning, and three is implementation, implementation and monitoring. Communities, as you have listed, all stakeholders, parents, local authorities, religious leaders, community leaders, key stakeholders in communities have to come together to, first of all, define the problem. Secondly, identify risk factors to education in general, but especially to the welfare of students and teachers. And then thirdly, to marshal local resources first and foremost, to see how these problems can be tackled or the risk minimized. Of course, it may be impossible to totally eliminate the risk, but of course, measures can be taken in such a way that communities are aware of the problems and they can take proactive measures. Many times we tend to ignore local knowledge. especially knowledge of the community terrain by residents and, of course, community leaders. They know a lot and they have a lot to offer. And like I said, the problem is local. And mobilization to deal with this problem has to begin from the local level. And it will involve everyone concerned.
All right, Professor.
And then, of course, our planners will have to think of ways of changing the perspective on physical nature, on physical location of these facilities in such a way that to minimize or to mitigate some of the problems arising from locational openness. When someone can walk into any place and do what they like, the problem is compounded.
All right, Professor, quickly before we go, at this point, it should not be an option that children are out of school. So do you think there would be, or there could be, an alternative education model that can be deployed in order for those children to be able to engage in some form of, education, like radio learning, mobile classrooms, and things like that, that can aid in, pushing forth education in the North?
Yeah, I have no doubt this approach is possible. What we need to do is to task our educational planners, to task our architects on how this can be achieved. Obviously, and fortunately for us, modern development, especially in technology, has made this learning very, there has been a revolution. But then, of course, this revolution needs to reach the rural areas where the population are. And of course, we have problems with power supply, we have problems with access, roads, and so on. All of this have to be looked at comprehensively so that all the problems will be identified. And of course, there are. If you look at the penetration of our communities by mobile technology, I think we can leverage on that to ensure that we find alternative models for making education available. I think it can be done. I am confident that the way that mobile technology has penetrated rural areas, we need to leverage on that a lot so that children will learn in conducive and safe environment. It is very, very possible, but we need to put our resources, we need to put our heads together, and this can be achieved. And of course, it will even be cheaper because the more that this technology is popularized, the cheaper it is. And I think we need to put more resources in those areas. It can be done. Much of it has been done. Some of it has been done a lot during the COVID lockdown. And I think we have failed to learn a lesson from that there are ways. If you check, for example, literacy and numeracy has expanded tremendously among the local population. Even people who have not gone to school will be able to pick up their telephone, dial numbers, and so on. This is numeracy, and that people are able to read, and so on. And I think we should leverage on that and expand it to education as a whole. Yes, we need a new paradigm. We need a new thinking in making education available, as it has been and as it is being done in many places all over the world.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Tukur Mohammed Baba, for unpacking a lot when it comes to insecurity versus education in northern Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you for speaking with us this morning.
My pleasure. The name is Tukur Mohammed Baba. I don't know where you are getting this ad from, but I think it's from one of my elder brothers. Thank you so very much, Professor Saad.
Apologies.
Tukur Saad of ABU.
All right. Thank you very much for that.